Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. It's Leanne here and I'm back with another video with another resin craft. This time it is using the same molds from Let's Resin that I showed you in my last video, and as they were kind enough to send me a whole bag, I figured I would do another video for you. This time I'm going to be using the molds from Let's Resin that are of the deer theme. This is just a little card here if you're interested in checking them out. And if you go onto their Facebook and send them a message, you can get a 30% off coupon to use on their online store, which is a pretty great deal. So I'm going to be using these molds today, which are the deer themed molds from the package that they sent me. I was really loving these when I first laid eyes on them. I was really excited to get to using these. Now, as usual, I'm using my epoxy resin. This is a 50-50 resin where you mix equal amounts of part A and B and add any colouring you want while you're mixing your resin. I'm going for traditional colours again today, but I'm also going to do a little bit of a vintage reindeer for you, showing you that you can use these moulds in ways that are not Christmas themed if you have these moulds at home yourself. First, I'm going to start by mixing up a really nice gold copper colour. My Christmas tree and all my living room decor is in greens and reds and gold, so this is why I go with these colours for this video, because even though I do love making resin, I still have to find a use for it if I make it. So most things I make will be made to the theme of my house or to themes that friends love, so I can gift the items. So now that my resin is mixed, I'm going to add some of this pigment. This is an actual metallic pigment for the copper bronze colour, and a friend actually sent this to me, and it's not actually mica powder. I'm not sure what it is, but I know that it is some sort of real metallic extract to colour your resin, and it's absolutely amazing. It's the best metallic pigment I've ever used, so if I find out where that's from, then I will try and find a link. Added a little bit of gold glitter to that too, just for a little bit of sparkle, because it wouldn't be me if there was no glitter in a resin video. Now it's really cold here in Scotland. We've had some really low temperatures. Actually, we've hit some records for the lowest temperatures, so my resin is really gloopy and thick in this video. I tend not to preheat my resin when I'm mixing colour, so bear with me whilst I just have to tilt and tip my mould to try and get my resin to move into all the little crevices. I do bring my heat tool to the table to help this speed up a little bit, but when my resin is cold and gloopy like this, I just have to work with it. I just have to be patient. I'm sorry if I sound a little off. I am actually unwell, and it was my birthday yesterday, and I am suffering from far too late at night and being sick, so bear with me if I sound really strange. I'm just pushing this into all the little bits here. This one I want to keep quite a thin layer because this piece I'm actually going to make a resin shape with a hollowed out middle. I figured that after using these molds in the last video, I would show you a different way of using these, because there's so many possibilities that you can do with one mold. You don't always have to use the mold exactly as it is. You can take it outside of the box and do different things. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you this little reindeer bell, but doing it in a different way to give you another option. I'm just getting all the resin all the way around that little deer, trying to be really careful because I don't want it on the deer itself. I just want this to be a perfect cutout. So I'm using a really thin tool, just drag the resin to the edges of the deer to help it self-level. And I do not want to overfill this. I want this to be a nice clean cutout of a reindeer. And once they are done, I'm going to leave them to set for a few hours. Now I actually came back and demolded these when they were still a little bit soft. As you can see, it's bending as I take them out. and that's purely because I had ideas for the mold needed quite quickly if I wanted it to be done together. So I waited until they were cured enough that they still took the shine of the mold. They were still pretty much cured, they were just a little bit soft. And a good way if you take something out of the mold too early to get it shaped back like I did with Deer is to use your heat tool, apply a little heat while it's lying on the table, and it will pull back to the shape that it should be. You can see here when I demold this is really bendy because it's a lot thinner. It's obviously taking longer to cure. So if you do demold things when they are not quite cured yet, be extremely careful and make sure you lay them on a flat surface in their shape that they should be to finish curing. As you can see, it's really sparkly and it turned out a really nice Christmassy colour. And I then went ahead and decided to pinch the molds to do something else. But before we get to that, I'm going to show you what I'm doing with this reindeer. I'm going to take some of these little letter beads that spell out the word joy, and I'm going to put them on a head pin. Just going to measure them across the gap across the reindeer's belly and see how much I need to cut off my head pin so that it nestles neatly inside the shape of the bell. I'm just going to cut off the end that has the actual head of the pin. And when I'm happy that my pin is long enough to sit across that void, I'm going to use some UV resin to act as a glue to hold this in place with a little dot at each side. This just means that when I come to doming this piece, this is going to be already sealed, already held in place, and I'm not going to have any issue with over pouring resin running down that head pin because it's all sealed in the UV resin and it's blocked off. So now that's nice and cured, I am just mixing up another layer of resin here, and this time I'm just going for the copper colour with no glitter. And you can see how amazing that metallic colour is. I put barely any pigment in my resin and it is such a strong, vibrant metallic colour. Now I'm just going to carefully dome my little bell piece here. And because this has the cutout in the middle, you have to be extra careful and not overdome. If you're going to do something like this, then make sure you actually wait until your resin has sat until it is a thicker consistency. Because I'm in a really cold part right now, my resin's already thick and I could use it straight away, and it makes it much easier to do this without any leakage. To get the little fine details, you just want to take a little pointy tool and just pull your resin gently to those areas just so you don't actually flood them, and then that should give you the perfect dome around your little cutout. Just be extremely careful and just don't go for too thick a layer. And this is where I knew I was going to be needing that mould because I wanted to make a second deer head. So that's me just pouring in that copper colour because I want to show you a Christmas themed deer and a non-Christmas themed deer if you have these moulds, to show that you can use these at any time of the year. Okay, so this is the next morning and my pieces are cured. As you can see, the back of the bell is cured. The front is looking pretty fabulous, but it is still quite thin. So I'm going to do the front of this piece and I am going to work on my little reindeer. Now, these reindeer I absolutely love. I love this simple flat shape. It means that you have a great working canvas to do other things to. You could paint these, you could add little googly eyes, you could really jazz these up, but what we're going to do today is actually make them really ornate. I'm going to mix myself up some clear resin, and because I'm going to be working in a thin layer with this resin, and this is not doming resin for my deer, I'm just going to go in unheated and use my heat tool to take away any bubbles. I'm just putting a thin dome on the front of my bell for the same reason as the back. I do not want that little cutout area to be flooded, although I do get a tiny bit of leakage when I do this because I do apply it a little bit thick. You'll see that in a moment. And just being careful as I smear around all the edges, trying to keep my stick pretty flat and push it to the edges before I add a little drip here and there to thicken it out. And if you watch right down at the feet of the reindeer, I do actually over pour a slight amount and it goes into the foot. But when that piece cured a little, I managed to pick that out before it solidified. Now to the reindeer, I am going to give them a really thin coat over the complete surface of the front of these reindeer, and this is going to be my glue for my next layer. I had an idea the first time I ever saw these reindeer molds when I first took them out of the Let's Resin package, and I just had it in my head that I wanted to make this slightly vintage inspired brooch. So this is what I'm doing with these. I'm going to make a Christmas themed something and this vintage inspired brooch. So what I'm going to do is go through all my stash and pick out similar items for each one in the desired colour scheme. On the Christmas one, I'm going for my traditionals, reds, greens, yellows, golds. And on the other one, I'm thinking more of the lavender, pinks, creams and vintage colours. And it's basically shop your stash, see what you have, see what you can pull together to make a coherent theme. And with this, there's no rules. If you want to make a collage piece like this, a 3D piece, it's completely up to you. You can do this with most shades of resin, or you just need a really thin layer of resin to lay your pieces into in a little collection of things. I'm just going to lay them out on my pieces as you can see and make a really pretty set of deer. Now I'm using some fake foliage there, some faux leaves, some Fimo roses, some resin flatback pieces, beads. I've even got some dyed shell, some metal roses, little fabric flower there, some pearl beads, and I bring in some crystals and some micro marbles too. I mean, there is no rules to what I put on here. I've just grabbed anything I like that is small and cute and will go together, and I'm just dipping them in the resin if they require it and laying them onto the piece. But some things I can just lay straight onto that layer of resin that I laid down on my deer and it will hold them fine. The thicker stuff I am dipping in the pot off camera there that you can see, that is my resin. Just the very base of it. I'm not completely submerging them, I'm just dipping them slightly because they will add to the thickness of the resin that is on the front of your deer. And I'm just gluing everything in place. And this will be solid, this will be a strong hold. And the little gaps, I'm adding some of these little tiny see-through crystals that are meant for nail art, and some of these little lilac sequins, iridescent shapes that are also meant for nail art. And I'm just building my decor as I go, placing things, moving things until I'm happy with the way I have it. And then I'm bringing in some purple micro marbles and I'm just tossing a few over the horns. Now as you can see the resin on the paper on the table as I move this about, there will be some residue comes off as you are placing things on. As long as you keep moving it around, wiping off the excess with the table mat before you move your resin to a place where it can cure, you shouldn't really have any big gloops or anything on the back of your piece. You're working in thin layers, remember, so you shouldn't get any massive overpour by doing this. And I'm just arranging this in the same way I did the other one, just filling in the little gaps, laying things the way I want them, adding little shinies here and there, and there's me bringing in the crystals. Now I did actually have a few ideas how I could use this one, being that it's a Christmas themed one and it matches my decor. Thought about making it a plant pot stick, thought about making it in a little tiny picture frame, even thought about making this a brooch and wearing it on Christmas, but in the end I do actually go for the option of a tree ornament. And just like the other one, I'm filling in any gaps with little crystals, little tiny bits and pieces, little extra bits of shine, and then I bring in the micro marbles to put on the antlers and some in the actual piece itself. Micro marbles are a very versatile thing in resin, I love them. So as my reindeer here is also still wet, I decided to add a few stars to that and to add a little bit of detail to the top of the bell because it was looking a little plain. So even though it is being domed, I'm just going in with some crushed glitter sparks at the top and then a little layer of micro marbles to blend the silver into the gold. I just think it was a little extra added detail rather than a flat resin piece. And while I was waiting on them curing, I decided to try the reindeer mould in yet another way. Now this technique, I had never tried it on a smaller scale, and even though it didn't work exactly how it should, it still turned out really pretty. This is something I think I will stick to doing in larger pieces, because I found in a really small piece the colours mixed a little too much. I think because there was such a low volume of each colour. So basically the idea is you mix up a few colours and you treat it the same way you would treat acrylic paint pouring, and that is you have your pour cup and you put all your colours in one cup unmixed together. So you're just laying the colours on top of each other as you can see me doing. And then the idea is that you then take that cup and you pour that into your resin piece, either just as is or you can swirl it, and the colours will actually come to some sort of blending and movement in the resin piece as you pour them, and it makes a really pretty effect. But the problem is I think I was just working with a very small amount of resin and a very small mould, so I don't get as much definition between the colours as I would have had this been a larger piece. You'll see it does work and it does make a really nice blend, a different way of pouring your resin colours. If you like some things to be a little bit unexpected, you don't like as much control and you like things to just be a little bit natural and coming out their own way, then this is a really good technique. And as you can see, I'm not going to use my stick to push the resin. I'm going to use my heat tool to make it more fluid and allow it to flow around the mould, which I think is another problem of why it didn't really work in this. The colours, as you can see there, are quite defined. You can see the blue, you can see the purple and the yellow, but because I had to get the resin up into the antlers, I had to heat my resin and move it around, and that actually blended the colours a little bit. So if this was a piece that did not require lots of manoeuvring, this probably would have been a great little technique and you would have had more definition of the colours. I'm adding some micro marbles in here and they're heavy enough that they will drop to the surface. And then I'm going to leave all of these to cure for overnight. So next morning I come back and this is how my pieces are looking. As you can see, they are actually adorable, 3D and very sparkly, and everything just looks really nice and shiny. And this is the piece out of the mould. You can see it's got a slight blue ear, but mostly the yellow and the purple dominate. And now we're on to doming the backs of the pieces. Now I'm just going to take a sanding file and get rid of any really high points, but I'm not taking away that edge because I'm actually going to use that containing my resin. I'm going to take my pieces, figure out what I want to make them into. I'm going to make this vintage one into a brooch, and at first I think of making the Christmas one into a plant pot decor, but I do end up opting for just a little charm so that I can turn it back into a decoration as I filled the hole earlier where it should have been. So I'm adding a little star charm to that one and a brooch bale to the other one, just using my relief paste, which is basically gel matte medium. Once I put them in place, I'm going to leave these to dry for quite a few hours to let this thoroughly dry all the way through so it's nice and solid and there'll be no dampness when it comes to doing my final layer of resin. So when I come back, I am going to balance these into little pots because the front of these are really 3D. So I'm just making sure I've got them nice and flat One's in a silicone cup, one's over a little shot glass, and then I'm going to apply my doming layer and these pieces shall be done. Now for my doming layer, I'm just going for a glitter background. I'm not being too fancy, just mixing up a little bit of resin, and I'm going for full on gold. I always like my backs of my pieces to be as pretty as the fronts, but you don't need to put a lot of effort in, you just need to go for a little bit of sparkle, and it covers any mess or any accidents that may have happened, while giving the back some interest should anybody ever see the back. And I'm being really careful when I put this layer in. It's not a thick layer, I'm just dripping a little bit of resin in and then using my stick to maneuver it all the way to the edges. That's why leaving that edge on when you sand is a good idea, because it acts as a barrier to contain your resin. And just don't overfill past where you have that little edge of resin, and you shouldn't have any overpour onto the front. And I'm going all the way around the bail, but I'm also going to take it to the middle of the bail just to make it nice and secure in there, but I'm staying away from any moving parts on my bail, not bezel. Just filling in the deer's antlers there with just little tiny drips of resin and dragging it all back down to the main part so that it all joins together and all self levels. It doesn't need to be thick, it just needs to be pretty. And then I'm going to the second deer and doing the exact same thing. If you find doming quite difficult, I'd suggest using a really thin, small tool for pulling your resin to the edges. If you find sticks like this cause you to pull the resin over the edge, it's just about practice, about getting used to your medium and knowing how to control it. I've done this for a long time, so I'm quite competent when it comes to doming. I rarely have any overpour or any drips anymore, although it still does happen, but I'm more used to my resin and how to work with it. And once they are domed, I'm just going to leave them aside and let them cure for one more night. This was a very long process. So here we are, this is my brooch, and as you can see on the front I have a tiny little air bubble on my deer mould at the noses, and that's purely because my resin was really thick when I was making these and I didn't pay too much attention at trying to get air bubbles out. They turned out really cute, and my decoration, I just added a little red bow to this one, and this will be going on my tree. And I think something like this could be really cute. You could personalise it, you could give it to somebody before Christmas as a yearly gift. You could make them a decoration every year for their tree, each one maybe having the year on or their name. And I think my favourite has to be this one though. I just love how it turned out and I love the colours, and I'm just going to put this one on a gold thread and hang it on my tree. So as you can see, this is how this one turned out. I still really like this effect. I'm not going to do anything with this one in this video. This was just to show you a different technique that you could use, and the micro marbles are very subtle, the ones that fell to the surface. So it's an idea for you to play with your resin. And thank you to Let's Resin for sending me these moulds. I'm really happy with these turned out, and I look forward to the final and last video for Let's Resin, which will be coming up in the next few days. Enjoy my pieces, and I will see you again in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit that bell button. These moulds, I'm really happy with these turned out, and I look forward to the final and last video for Let's Resin, which will be coming up in the next few days. Enjoy my pieces, and I will see you again in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit that bell button.